Tonight, the kingdom is waiting. You wake to the sound of wind in the highest branches, not the sheltered, filtered air of the lower canopy that the realm's inhabited platforms move in, where the great trees absorb the wind's energy through their upper crowns and deliver only the softer residual to the spaces between them. This is the wind as it exists above the canopy, the open air of the high world that has come unimpeded across the forest's full extent before arriving at the crown survey platform, carrying in its passage the particular cold and clarity of air that has not touched the ground in a long time, that has been moving through the upper atmosphere of the forest for distances that make the valley below feel local and small. The survey platform is the highest inhabited structure in this section of the realm, built into the crown of the tallest tree in the eastern survey range. Its floor, at a level where the canopy's continuous surface is visible from above rather than from within, the tree's upper branches spreading below the platform rather than around it. You have slept here for 3 nights at the start of the survey season. As you sleep here at the start of every survey season, the ascent to the crown platform marking the transition from the realm's inhabited world to the survey world in the same way that a ferryman's first crossing marks the beginning of the day. A threshold crossed deliberately, with knowledge of what it means and what it requires. The sleeping space is minimal, the platform built for observation and record keeping rather than comfort. Its walls open to the air on 3 sides and closed on only the 4th. The windward side, where the woven screen provides enough shelter to make sleep possible in the conditions the crown experiences through the night. The screen is moving in the morning wind, its woven surface flexing with each gust in the way that living material structures flex, accommodating rather than resisting the branches it is made from, still technically alive in their woven positions, and responding to the wind with the residual responsiveness of living wood. Through the screen's gaps, the pre-dawn sky shows the deep blue of the hour before light, the stars of the western quadrant still fully visible, and the eastern horizon showing the first almost imperceptible lightning that means the sun is preparing its approach below the world's edge. You dress in the survey layers, the warmest clothes in the realm's working wardrobe, the wind at crown level. Cold enough in the early season that the mid-canopy inhabitants who occasionally accompany surveyors on observation visits are invariably surprised by the temperature difference between the world they know and the world 30 meters above it. The survey pack is ready from the night before, the instruments wrapped, and the record book in its waterproof cover, and you take it up and step out through the windward screen's opening onto the observation deck. The observation deck faces east, and the view from it at this hour of this morning is the reason the survey work is what it is, and not something done from below. The canopy spreads away from the platform in every direction to the horizon, its upper surface a continuous terrain of crown forms, each tree expressing its species and its age and its health in the particular shape of its crown. The whole of it, a living map of the forest's composition that the trained surveyor reads the way a ferryman reads a river, continuously and with a knowledge built from years of the same observation. In the pre-dawn blue, the canopy is a single dark mass, broken by the slightly lighter sky, where the valleys between the ridges interrupt the forest's continuity. The ridgelines visible as slightly elevated runs of crown against the horizon, and the valley floors as gaps where the tree canopy gives way to the open water of the streams that the forest's topography collects. As the light builds from the east, the canopy's surface resolves from its pre-dawn uniformity into its individual crowns, the closest trees showing their forms first, and the detail spreading outward from the platform as the growing light reaches further across the forest's extent, the horizon remaining a silhouette while the foreground becomes particular. By the time the sun's first edge clears the eastern ridge, the full survey range is visible in the morning light, the canopy extending to the limits of the season's observation zone in the east and north and south, and in the west, the deeper, older section of the forest, where the great trees are larger and their crowns broader, and the canopy surface sits slightly higher than the younger sections to either side. You stand at the observation deck's eastern rail for the full duration of the sunrise, the survey record open, but the pen not yet moving, because the first observation of a survey morning is made with the eyes and the memory before it is made with the pen, the overall reading of the forest's condition in this light requiring the whole of the surveyor's attention before any part of it is reduced to notation. The forest this morning is in the condition that 3 days of pre-dawn arrival have been building your sense of the eastern section's healthy and in active growth, the crowns well formed, and the canopy surface continuous without the gaps that disease or storm damage produce. The species composition visible in the variation of crown form and colour that the trained eye reads as naturally as the letters of a familiar script. The crown survey instruments are unlike the instruments of any other Elven discipline, designed for the particular requirements of observation at height and distance, rather than the close and precise work of the herbalist's bench or the keeper's repair tools. The primary instrument is the long glass, a tube of the clear crystal fitted with lenses at each end that brings distant objects to apparent closeness, its design refined over the generations of surveyors who have used it on this and the other crown platforms through the range. Each generation's instrument makers improving the lens quality and the tube's balance until the current version is as good as the realm's optical knowledge currently allows. You take the long glass from its case and extend it to its working length, the sections sliding smoothly into position in the way of a well-made instrument whose tolerances have been held correctly through its manufacture, and bring it to your eye at the eastern rail. The far ridgeline, 3 valleys distant and barely distinguishable from the horizon by the unaided eye, resolves through the long glass into individual crown forms, the trees at that distance showing their shapes clearly enough to be classified by species and assessed for condition, the glass collapsing the survey distance into something the eye can read rather than merely observe. The secondary instrument is the angle measurer, a device of the realm's own development that allows the surveyor to record the bearing and elevation of any feature in the survey range precisely enough to place it on the survey map without visiting it directly. A crown anomaly noted at distance through the long glass can be given its position in the map through the angle measurer's reading the notation precise enough that a subsequent ground party can navigate to the feature from the map entry alone. This is the instrument that makes the Crown Survey a practical contribution to the realm's knowledge, rather than merely a record of the surveyor's impressions. The combination of the long glass's visual resolution and the angle measurer's positional precision produces entries in the survey record that are genuinely locatable in the forest rather than approximately described. You run the calibration sequence for both instruments against the fixed reference points on the survey platform's railing. The bronze markers placed by the platform's original builders at the positions corresponding to known features in the survey range, their bearings recorded in the survey record's calibration section. Both instruments confirm their calibration within the acceptable tolerance. The survey can begin. The morning survey begins at the eastern boundary of the season's observation zone and moves systematically westward through the survey range, the long glass working across each section of the canopy in the horizontal sweeps that the survey protocol specifies. Each sweep at a slightly lower elevation than the previous, so that the full depth of the survey range is covered without missing the areas where the ridgelines and valleys create overlapping lines of sight. The protocol was developed over many survey seasons by surveyors who found through experience that unsystematic observation, however attentive, misses features that the systematic approach finds. The human tendency to be drawn toward what is interesting, causing the eye to dwell on the notable and pass too quickly over the ordinary, which is where the early signs of change most often appear. The eastern section shows the young growth that has been establishing itself in the area, disturbed by the large storm of 6 seasons ago. The gap it created in the canopy, now filling with the pioneer species that colonize open patches before the slower growing climax, species reassert the forest's composition. The succession process visible in the crown forms as a different texture in the canopy surface. The smaller and more irregular crowns of the pioneer growth, distinct from the larger and more rounded forms of the established forest around them. The succession is proceeding at the rate that previous surveys have documented for this species combination in this part of the range, slightly faster on the northern side of the gap, where the aspect gives more morning sun, and slightly slower on the south. The difference predictable and noted in the record, without requiring comment beyond the measurement. A section of the northern ridge shows a crown thinning that was at the edge of the tolerance range in last season's survey, and that this morning's reading confirms has moved slightly further in the thinning direction. The canopy surface here less continuous than the surrounding forest. The crowns of the affected trees slightly smaller and less vigorous than their neighbors. The cause is most likely the root competition from the dense understory growth that has established itself on this slope over the past decade. The understory trees drawing water and nutrients from the same soil horizon as the canopy trees, and the competition showing first in the canopy's upper expression. You take the angle measurer's reading for the affected section and enter it in the record with the notation that means increased monitoring recommended, and the brief description of the observation that will allow the ground survey team to assess the root competition hypothesis when the season permits a close inspection. A wrong entry here, a bearing recorded imprecisely, a species identification made with insufficient care, sends the ground team to the wrong location or the wrong trees, and the season's monitoring recommendation is lost not in this survey year, but in the one following, when the follow-up finds nothing at the recorded location, and the affected section goes another year without the attention it warrants. The angle measurer is read twice for every notable entry, the second reading confirming the first before the notation is written. The few minutes this costs paid back many times over in the reliability of the record. By mid-morning, the eastern and northern sections of the survey range have been completed and entered in the record, their observations adding to the seasonal picture that the Crown Survey contributes to the realm's understanding of the forest's condition at the largest scale. The sun is high enough now that the shadow quality that made the dawn observation so revealing has given way to the fuller, more even illumination of the mid-morning. The crown surfaces catching the light from above and showing their health in the color and density of their foliage, rather than in the shape-revealing sidelight of the low sun. You pause for the mid-morning rest on the observation deck's sheltered side, the woven screen reducing the wind to a manageable presence, while you eat and look out over the canopy in the direction of the western section, the older forest where the great trees' crowns are broader and more massive than the eastern ranges. The canopy surfaced there, sitting visibly higher against the sky on clear days, and today showing itself in the full complexity of a mature mixed forest, the different species crown forms interlocking at the canopy level in the dense and varied texture that indicates a forest community that has been developing without major disturbance for a very long time. The Crown Survey platform's position above the canopy gives the surveyor a relationship to the forest that no other vantage in the realm provides, not closer to it in the sense of intimacy, but higher above it in the sense of perspective. The forest visible as a system rather than as an environment to move through, its patterns apparent at this scale, in the way that patterns are only apparent when you are far enough from the thing to see its full extent. The realm's keepers and herbalists and bridge workers know the forest from within it, their knowledge close and particular and irreplaceable. The surveyor's knowledge is wide and relational, the knowing of how this section relates to that one, and how this season's condition compares to last decade's. The kind of knowledge that only exists at altitude and only accumulates across generations of the same observation, made from the same elevated position. The wind moves across the canopy below you as you eat, the crown surface responding to it in the slow, continuous wave that a large enough area of forest produces when the wind passes over it. The movement beginning at the eastern edge of the visible range and travelling westward across the full extent of the survey zone in a progression that takes several minutes to complete. The whole of the forest moving together in the way that things of sufficient scale move together when acted on by a single force. The western survey section occupies the afternoon, and it is in the western section, in the third sweep of the long glass across the far ridgeline, 3 valleys distant, that you find what you are not looking for. The canopy in that section is the old-growth forest you have been observing from this platform for the years of your survey career, and that the record documents across the generations of surveyors before you, its character known and its annual variation documented, the crowns there large and well separated, and the canopy surface slightly opened in the way of very old forest, where the dominant trees have grown large enough that their crowns do not touch. The gaps between them allowing light to reach the lower levels and supporting the multi-layered structure that old growth produces over centuries of undisturbed development. In the far valley, at a bearing you take immediately with the angle measurer, there is a section of crown that does not match the old growth pattern of the forest around it, or the younger growth pattern of the disturbed areas you surveyed this morning. It is denser than the old growth, its crowns closer together, and the canopy surface more continuous. The texture of it through the long glass suggesting a different species composition or a different age class or both. The crown forms slightly different in their proportion from the trees on either side, shorter and broader in a way that is characteristic of certain very old varieties of the realm's primary canopy species that grow differently from the standard form when they have been isolated from the main population for very long periods. You study the section through the long glass for a long time, moving the instrument across its extent slowly and returning to its edges to confirm the boundary where its character changes back to the surrounding old growth. The section is perhaps 20 tree lengths across at its widest and sits in the valley bottom, where the topography creates a microclimate different from the ridgeline forest around it. Moister and more protected from the prevailing winds, the kind of location where unusual communities sometimes persist through climate variations that the surrounding forest cannot weather. It is not in the current survey record as anything other than old growth forest. The previous survey's resolution at this distance not having distinguished its character from the surrounding canopy. You take the full angle measurer reading, bearing, and elevation and estimated extent, and enter it in the record with the notation that means feature of uncertain character, detailed ground survey warranted. The notation does not speculate about what the section is, or why it exists, where it exists, or what it might mean for the realm's understanding of this part of the forest. The record entry is the observation, precise and complete, and without interpretation, beyond what the observation directly supports. The interpretation is for the realm's scholars and the ground survey team, and the long consideration that genuine uncertainty deserves. And none of those things happen on the observation deck at 3 valleys distance through a long glass on a single survey morning. What the morning has given is a location precisely recorded and the honest notation that something is there that the record has not previously distinguished. That is the gift the Crown Survey occasionally produces, not the confirmation of what is known, but the finding of what is not yet known. And the finding is complete when it is written down accurately, the rest following in its own time. The afternoon survey continues through the remaining western sections after the anomaly entry, the systematic sweeps completing the season's observation zone as the sun moves toward the western ridge and the light's angle begins to change from the overhead quality of the midday to the lower, side-lit quality of the late afternoon that is almost as useful as the dawn light for reed and crown structure. The shadows returning to the crown forms from the opposite direction and revealing features that the flat midday light concealed. 2 further notes are added to the record before the survey session ends, both within the range of normal seasonal variation. both entered with the same precision. The anomaly entry received, because the ordinary observations matter as much as the extraordinary ones. The record's value lying in its completeness, rather than in the selection of its most interesting contents. The descent from the crown platform begins in the late afternoon. The climb down through the great tree's upper structure, from the survey world back into the canopy world. The transition happening gradually as the branches close above and the open sky recedes, and the filtered green-gold light of the inhabited canopy replaces the direct sun of the crown. You move through the upper branches with the attention they require, the route down familiar but never routine, each placement of hand and foot considered rather than assumed, because the consequences of an error at this height are more significant than the consequences of an error at the height where the realm's everyday life is conducted. The canopy closes over you as you descend through its uppermost layer, the sky visible in diminishing gaps between the crowns, and the quality of the air changes with the closing, warmer, stiller, carrying the green and living smell of the inhabited forest, rather than the cold clarity of the open atmosphere above it. The sounds of the canopy resume around you as the wind of the crown gives way to the softer air of the mid-level, the birds whose territories are in the upper canopy, audible now in the way they are not audible from the survey platform, where the wind overwhelms the smaller sounds, and the sense of re-entering a world you know replaces the sense of being above it that the crown produces. The home platform receives you in the late afternoon light. The familiar woven walls and the survey equipment cases and the record shelf where the season's completed entries accumulate in their dated order. You hang the survey pack on its hook and remove the instruments, checking each one after the day's use for any damage from the wind or the handling. Finding them correct, returning them to their cases with the care that precision instruments warrant after a day in the field. The long glass sections are wiped with a soft cloth before storage. The lens surfaces checked for any dust or moisture that the cap did not fully exclude. Found clean, the cap replaced, and the case secured. The record book is open to today's entries and read through in the way the survey discipline requires. At the end of each session, the entries reviewed for completeness and legibility and internal consistency. The bearing readings checked against each other for any that sit outside the range that the day's survey geometry would produce. All entries are correct. The anomaly entry is read last, its bearing and extent and notation reviewed with the same critical attention as the ordinary entries, confirmed as precisely recorded, its notation honest about the limits of what the long glass observation can establish, and accurate about what it does establish. You sit at the platform's edge as the evening comes into the canopy, your feet resting on the branch below, and the survey range visible to the east and south in the amber light of the late day. The canopy surface below the survey platform, showing its upper crowns in the warm light that the low sun gives to the eastward-facing surfaces. The forest in this light is at its most clearly itself, the individual crowns of the great trees casting their shadows westward across the canopy surface, and the intercrown gaps showing as bright openings where the light descends to the lower layers. The whole of the visible range, a composition of light and form, that changes from minute to minute as the sun descends and the shadows extend. Somewhere in the far western valley, at the bearing recorded in today's entry, the anomaly grove sits in its particular microclimate, in the light that the surveyor's platform cannot reach from this distance, its unusual crowns doing whatever they have been doing through the long seasons that preceded any record's notation of them, present in the forest for reasons the record does not yet understand, and doing no harm by being present, simply existing as a feature of the forest that the realm's knowledge has not yet fully encountered. The record holds the location. The location will wait. The forest has been waiting longer than the record by a considerable margin, and nothing in the observation from this morning's platform suggests that it is in any hurry. Your hands rest in your lap, and the amber light moves through the canopy below you, and the wind from the crown is a memory in your clothes, and the survey is complete, still, open, complete.